This is going to be Common Roots. It is hosted by myself, Caitlin, and my wife, Cheshire. We grew up in the U.S., but we now live in the beautiful seaside city of Brighton in the UK, the south coast, for those who don't know. Yeah, I am Caitlin. I use she, her pronouns.
I am Cheshire. I also use she, her pronouns. And I love Brighton, by the way. It's amazing here.
Yeah, we moved just this past May, so we are getting into it. And yeah, it's beautiful and it's not snowing.
Yeah, that's true. Rarely. Yeah, it does snow a little, but it's very funny. I think there's a lot less snow here, so people are less used to it. But from where we were in the U.S., where I've spent my whole life, and Caitlin, a lot of hers, we'd get, 6 inches. So we're not getting that anymore. It's nice to not have to shovel, that's for sure.
Yeah. I do have a little blurb that I wrote to kind of talk about what the goal of the podcast is. Most of the episodes of Common Roots are going to include a specific plant or tree that is associated with herbal medicine and spiritual practice. We want to talk about the plant itself, its history, how you can use the plant, whether it's consuming it safely, obviously, or incorporating it into a spiritual journey. In addition, we're going to explore topics related to complementary medicine, spiritual healing, holistic wellness, and healthcare accessibility. It's a super important topic for both of us. We're going to touch on marginalized groups and how they have defied medical gatekeeping to take care of each other, forming communities. We're going to try and keep angry political ranting to a minimum, I say, as I look at Cheshire.
I can get very passionate. I also think Caitlin, my gorgeous, beautiful wife, is the genius, the witch behind a lot of this knowledge, and a lot of what I'm here to do is learn. But I do have my own spin on it, and I think for me, the highest priority, I think I want to bring healthcare back to the people. I think that's what a lot of our goal is, basically, which we do partially through education and partially by hopefully making it fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the topics that we cover, they are going to be stuff that makes people angry or sad. But I think what we want to focus on is not just like blaming people for the problems that happened, but showing you guys, our listeners, how you can take control of your own health in times of crisis or just times of difficulty. Obviously, the situation with healthcare in America is much different than the UK, but they both have issues that people encounter.
I think we're about good vibes and helping you have a better life.
Yeah, it's helping people become advocates for their own health. So for this episode, we're going to talk about introducing ourselves, obviously. We're going to be talking about our mental health journey, because I think mental health is probably the biggest hurdle that a lot of people encounter where they have difficulty getting treatment or diagnoses or just help from others. So specifically, you want to talk about what experience you're going to be sharing with us?
Yes. So I will say we should probably do some kind of a trigger warning that there are going to be some heavy topics discussing, what's the euphemism? Unaliving.
Yeah.
So
self-harm, I think we're allowed to say.
Yes. So it can get a little heavy. But again, I mean, I think our main focus, especially for our first episode, is to be more positive.
Because obviously you are here and beautiful and with us, and you feel great compared to how you used to. So.
I do. I mean, you had to push me. Thank God that I had my lovely wife.
Yeah.
But you did. I do feel miles better than I ever was. So it's it's not just a story of how miserable I was. It's a story of how I'm a lot better now, and what we did that I think was quite abnormal. Like in order to achieve that. Because I did go through the typical process, and it didn't really work for me. Which is nothing, we don't want to demean the typical process, right? I think it works for a lot of people. But it doesn't work for everyone, and that's why we want to let people take more control, I want to say.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that later, and I'll stop interrupting my wife's spiel. I'm sorry.
No, that's totally fine. So specifically, we're going to talk about psychedelics and how they are used as a non-traditional psychotherapy, psychopharmacological treatment. I'm going to try not to pronounce words wrong, so I apologize if I do.
That's okay.
But yeah, so I guess before we get into the actual meat of psychedelics and non-traditional mental health treatment, I think we could do a little intro of each of us. I am Caitlin. Like I said, I am a herbalist. What do they say, herbalist in here?
I guess
the
they
UK?
would, yes.
Yeah, they pronounce the H. So I am a professional herbalist. I make teas, tinctures, skincare products, oils, blah, 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 blah. We're actually in the process of opening a brick and mortar store here in Brighton, which we're very excited about. I also do workshops and educational classes here in Brighton as part of that process of teaching people about herbalism. I don't know. I'm gonna go back and forth between the two. That way, everyone will be mad at me.
You could say whatever you like. Frankly, I mean, we're trying to be authentic, right?
Yeah.
Although I will say, in my own experience, every time I say I'd like a tomato here in Brighton, they are like, "Ah, yes, and a tomato."
Yeah. So I have not always been an herbalist. I have studied psychology in university. I've also just been a regular boring office worker doing customer service stuff. I came into this industry line of work partly through my own journey, partly through Cheshire's journey, and just what we've learned about, healthcare and accessibility, and herbalism is such a great way to give people access to things that will make them feel physically, mentally better. And it's relatively safe and wholesome.
And I think you've always been a healer.
Yeah, that's why I studied psychology in the first place. I've always really had a strong desire to help others. And I went through, I've had my own journeys with addiction and mental health. So just knowing that it's something that so many people struggle with, I definitely wanted to, help.
Yeah, help me, help the world. You've helped a lot of people.
I don't know about the world, but...
Well, we'll move on to the world. When this podcast
Baby
gets
steps.
8 billion listeners, which is definitely going to happen.
Yeah.
Like and subscribe.
Thank you.
Yes.
But yeah, you go ahead now.
My name is Cheshire. Hello, nice to meet you. I am a giant nerd. I enjoy history. I play a lot of video games, often, I would say, historical-themed video games. I'm basically the quintessential giant nerd, which I love, honestly. I can be a chatterbox, as you may have noticed. I have to try to control myself, I think, sometimes, to not interrupt my wife's wisdom. And I have 0 qualifications, other than that I go on Wikipedia a lot. But like I said, a lot of this I'm here to learn, and I have learned a lot. I used to be very skeptical of everything, really, and quite negative, I would say, as well. And I'm a lot more positive now, a lot more willing to learn, and I have learned a lot. We have a lot of crystals out on the table. And now I can recognize all of them, and the littler ones I carry around in my purse. I don't think I should carry the big malachite in my purse, but...
Well, you don't want to break it.
That's true. That would be devastating. I think it's nice.
What's your favorite crystal?
The citrine. Absolutely, the citrine. I love citrine. It's bright and yellow, and it brings good luck and joy, and that's my favorite one for that reason. I think we could all use a little bit of luck. And I also like the hematite because it's heavy, and if I'm overwhelmed by negative energy, which it absorbs, I just hold it in my hand and close my eyes and relax for a second.
It's very grounding.
It's a good way to get out of a thought spiral, which I spend a lot of time in. So it's perfect for me, I would say, because it's very easy. I mean, any level of criticism I often take quite harshly. And then I think to myself, what did I do wrong? And it's like, no. Often that's not at all what they mean. And I need to just relax and take the criticism. So being able to ground yourself with a big, heavy rock is pretty nice.
So like I mentioned, we're going to be discussing psychedelics. Mm-hmm. So I do have a section that's devoted to just kind of sharing information about it. I guess of the two of us, I'm the one who is more research heavy. So I got a lot of this stuff from like the NHS website, from the PubMed Resource Center, discovered a couple of books. So one thing about the podcast, because we do want it to have that educational aspect to it, I will always share all of my sources so you guys can go read. I don't want to just say stuff and then have people believe it. I want you guys to be able to go verify. Trust, but verify, right?
Yeah, I think it's very important that we don't put out any misinfo, basically.
Not on purpose,
right?
anyway.
Yes, and we'll do a retraction if we make a mistake.
Yeah.
But I think it's critically important because a lot of this is life-changing or life-saving, but potentially it could be, life-ruining. I mean, maybe that's over-dramatic, but be careful with it,
And that goes for if we're talking about psychedelics or just talking about a tea.
Yes, yeah, please. Anything that we say, don't take as the gospel truth. We will do our utmost to make sure that it is true, but, it's your health. That's really what we want to do, is empower people to look into their own health.
And just to be clear, I also use Wikipedia sometimes because Wikipedia has sources.
Wikipedia is great. I mean, there's evidence that Wikipedia has less errors than the Encyclopedia Britannica, if I recall correctly.
I think that's true.
But there are certain things that slip. And I think anything on the internet, I think there was some scandal where someone just made up that they were the inventor of the toaster. And it hung around on Wikipedia for 20 years until someone figured it out.
Yeah. So, traditional psychedelic drugs are LSD, mescaline, also known as peyote, psilocybin, also known as magic mushrooms, and DMT. And then there is MDMA, which is not a traditional psychedelic. It's actually called an empathogen, using that word empath because of the way it works on your brain. So MDMA is also called ecstasy. Makes you huggy, I guess most people will say. And then we have the dissociative anesthetics, which is ketamine, as well as phencyclidine.
I'm only familiar with about half of those, in all honesty.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we will be talking about ketamine more in detail later, because that is what helped me the most. Yeah.
So specifically, ketamine is the only one of this list that you and I have tried. Even
legally. I will say that. Please don't get street ketamine. You don't know what's in it.
Well, I will go into that a little bit about warnings and stuff like that. So LSD is the biggest one we're going to talk about real quick, just to kind of give you guys an overview of how psychedelics were originally formed and used and some of that history. So LSD was first synthesized back in the 1940s. It is a fully synthetic chemical, and when it was first synthesized, it was actually pretty much immediately put into use as psychotherapy.
So I will say, I find that fascinating. How do they make a synthetic drug like that?
I'm not entirely sure about the whole process because I didn't go down the full rabbit hole. I know that, so LSD is the L, the S, and the D are 3 separate chemicals. Oh, it's actually 2 different chemicals, lysergic acid and diethylamide.
But how did they know that it would work on the brain, I guess, basically, is my curiosity.
Well,
So it all comes from nature in the end, really.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
But then they just concentrated it.
But yeah, he was making a psychedelic drug. It's not like he accidentally was like,
oh, yeah.
Whoa,
I'm sure
he
knew. Well, back then it was all legal, too, I'm pretty sure, right?
Yes, absolutely. LSD specifically wasn't made illegal until 1966. The synthesizer, the original creator of LSD, I do have a quote from him where he said, "The patient under the influence of LSD had the ability to recall distant, repressed memories and revisit past traumatic experiences with great clarity." So originally LSD was used as a drug of last resort for patients who were suffering from psychosis, post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, obviously we're talking about the 1940s. There was a lot of study after the war into PTSD and how to help these people who were suffering. And the benefit of LSD was it allowed them to relive these memories without the horrible physical and mental effects of re-experiencing trauma. Fortunately, like I said, 1966, LSD was made illegal in the U.S. the UK specifically had a really great history of psychedelic use.
Yeah.
There was a specific doctor at Powick Hospital in Gloucestershire.
Okay.
Does that sound right?
Gloucestershire, probably.
Gloucestershire?
I mean, it's different because
all the UK.
I'm from the
people
Northeast,
left.
so it took all of the UK names and then it pronounces it with a completely different accent.
As an American, I would look at that word and go, Gloucestershire.
Well, see, I'm used
So at
to like
least I
Gloucester
know.
is what we'd probably call that, right, in the
Probably
U.S.
is, yeah.
But I wonder if that is what
Gloucestershire.
if it's Gloucestershire,
Well, because they say Worcestershire, right?
Worcestershire,
Worcestershire. Close enough.
No, they'll get you. You better watch out, Miss Tomato.
Anyway, in that place,
Yes.
he pioneered the use of psycholytic psychotherapy, where he used low doses of LSD with ongoing psychotherapy over like a treatment course. So they would be in the hospital in an inpatient treatment. And so they would basically be microdosing LSD every day. So that was extremely helpful. Unfortunately, the Vietnam War and the counterculture were actually probably the reason why LSD was criminalized.
Yeah, they were trying to repress the hippies. I think you're right.
Yeah, so people weren't happy about the Vietnam War or the Korean War. So it created a counterculture which did involve a lot of recreational drug use.
Yeah.
Marijuana, psychedelics were all part of that.
And then they were banned.
There were so this is the part where I do say there are some problems with recreational use.
Of course.
A lot of the problems that came from LSD specifically were people who were mixing LSD with alcohol, mixing LSD with other recreational drugs like uppers or downers. Mm-hmm. They were using LSD in extremely stimulating environments like clubs, bars, raves. There was no sober party member to keep an eye on these people.
That's not a best practice.
Yes. So the issue became there were a lot of people who were reporting extremely bad trips. One particularly famous case in the U.S., which is part of the reason the drug was criminalized. A nurse was dosed with LSD against her will. She was not knowingly taking LSD for fun. She was dosed illegally against her will, which would be illegal even if the drug was decriminalized.
Of course, should be.
And she was in a 16-hour hospital shift and ended up throwing herself off of the roof of the hospital.
Oh my God. Wow. Okay,
so
that is not good.
So this case was highly publicized. The media blew it up by saying people are taking LSD and unaliving themselves. Most interestingly, in 1968, the colleagues of psychiatrists and psychotherapists published an article in the American Journal of Psychiatry detailing various forces that had successfully discredited legitimate LSD research. The essay argues that individuals in government and the pharmaceutical industry sabotaged the psychedelic research community by canceling ongoing studies and analysis while labeling genuine scientists as charlatans. So basically, there was a group of psychiatrists who were convinced that it was kind of a deliberate smear campaign against them.
Well, I remember, I can't remember the name of the guy. He was someone strongly affiliated with Nixon. I want to say his campaign manager or something. There's a quote from him where basically he says, "We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be black or a hippie, but we could make it illegal to use marijuana or other substances, basically. And then we had an excuse to go in and break up the meetings and, really disrupt those communities." And he just says it outright. And of course, there was no consequence for that. So,
yeah.
But, I do think people are learning more that it's I know, so ketamine is legal. Well, it's legal and illegal, right? Depends where you get it.
Yeah, it's like marijuana in the UK. It's the same deal.
I think also, so ketamine for me, I was last dosed quite a while ago now. And I think it lasts for a very long time, the effects of ketamine, months.
Yeah. So, obviously, criminalization is a huge problem, not just for marginalized communities, but for the scientific community.
Yeah.
Because you can't get government grants. You can't research. You can't do scientific studies. You can't do medical studies.
I think sometimes you can, but it has to be it's quite a process.
Extremely controlled.
Yes.
Which means that you have to have a lot of money or a lot of prestige to be able to do it.
Yeah.
And that's why we do have more recently, we have a lot of more studies on marijuana in the past 30 years because it has become
more legal in the U.S. at least.
Yeah. But yeah, the problem with criminalization is not just one of marginalized communities losing access or becoming criminalized, but yeah, government support is stopped, which is a lot of research, science that's just kind of thrown away or never can happen.
Yeah, but it isn't impossible because that way, it's like, oh, well, you technically can do it. It's just 10 times harder.
Yeah. So during my research, I came across a book called The Secret Chief Revealed, which is going to be the subject of a future episode, again, about psychedelics. But basically this psychotherapist in the 1970s created an underground movement of psychotherapy using mostly MDMA, but also LSD. To basically continue treating people.
Don't spoil it too much.
I know.
That is interesting.
That's basically it.
Teaser for
future episodes.
Stick around. Like and subscribe.
So real quick about the science behind psychedelics. So now that we know a little bit about the background of psychedelics and how they were developed and how they were originally used in psychotherapy, and thankfully some of them are being allowed to come back in that capacity, let's talk about why or how they work a little bit. Please. So the main special word of the day, I guess, is neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity refers to the brain's ability to reorganize and rewire neural connections, which enable it to adapt and function better. Or again. So the most common, I think people might understand, is stroke victims. A lot of them will lose the ability to speak because that part of the brain literally died.
Yeah.
Their brain rewires the speech center physically. Inside your brain, neurons will rewire themselves to give you the ability to speak again.
Yeah. I do think, for ketamine, I think what it really did for me was get me out of the rut. And at that point, I already had my darling wife, who was such a rock that it was like, she was there for me.
You can't keep upping me so much. People are going to be like, you're
I love my wife.
Weird wife girl.
I am a wife girl. I'm a wife gal. So for me, ketamine was kind of a magic bullet, but what ketamine did really wasn't to instantly cure me, basically, right? What it did was get me out of this rut of extremely pessimistic, negative emotions that I felt pretty much continuously about, first of all, myself primarily, and second of all, everything else.
Yeah.
And even while I was surrounded by my wife's love and the love of other people in my life, I was kind of in the desert. When it rains, the rain doesn't really soak into the soil because it's so dry that it just washes off and makes a flood. And that's kind of how I was responding to love. And I think what neuroplasticity was able to do was to soften the soil, basically, so that I could actually experience love again. I had already decided how I and the world worked in a horrible way that only made me feel bad. And it was not reflective of reality. I think a lot of pessimists, including myself at the time, would be like, oh, I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. And it's like, no, there is a point where you go well past any sort of reality into just constantly berating yourself and other people.
Yeah.
And being able to be broken out of that was good. But then that wasn't the end of it, right? Like, I couldn't just take ketamine and walk away and do the same things that I had done every day, or I would have just gone right back into the rut.
Yeah.
But it allowed me to change. It was like a change catalyst.
That's a great word for it, yeah. Yeah, so traditional antidepressants, everyone's pretty familiar with. There's SSRIs and SNRIs, which are actually a little bit rarer. Most of them are designed to increase your serotonin, dopamine, or noradrenaline. However, the biggest problem is that they have found that the depressed brain has been found to have a reduced number of synapses in the first place. So even if you increase serotonin, dopamine, or noradrenaline, your brain doesn't have enough synapses to accept those neuroreceptors.
Interesting.
Yeah, so ketamine has been found to increase the number of dendritic synapses in your brain, which are the little electric signals that go between two synapses. It's been called a psychoplastogen. That was the other cool word I found.
That is a really cool word.
I know. I did just ketamine because that's what we're going to be talking about, but a lot of psychedelics work in a very similar way where they affect the neuroplasticity of your brain. So if you have more synapses, in some cases, like for you example, you no longer have to take an SSRI. Your brain probably had enough serotonin in it. You just didn't have enough synapses to use the serotonin that you have.
Yeah. See, my part of the
course
reason we
that's
want to do this
theory,
show
but-
is that I was taking all sorts of antidepressants, and none of them really worked for me.
Yeah.
I mean, it worked enough in that I wasn't dead, but it was not good. The side effects hit me really hard on several of them.
Yeah.
And it was like, it didn't really solve the problem. It just sort of numbed it.
Yeah.
But I do want to say, like, I don't want to demean these things for other people. I think...
Just to be clear, I am on SNRIs right now, and I love them. I love
Yeah.
my medicine.
I think it's important that, like, we really do want to stress that this... Because I hear alternative medicine used a lot. I think that's a possibly detrimental term. I think this is more like complementary medicine. These are things that you should apply to your life if it speaks to you, and you can give it a try, basically, right? But I don't think we should just throw out all Western medicine into the garbage bin. Like, it does miraculous things. I worry that in this space, there are some charlatans, to be honest, who will sell you something and say this will cure your cancer, right? And we really don't want to do that. If you have a serious illness like that, you really ought to go to the doctor and get chemotherapy or whatever you have to do.
Just to be 100% clear, both of us believe in science. We believe in medicine.
Mm-hmm.
We believe in pharmaceuticals.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't like the system.
Yes.
We don't like a lot of the people running the system.
Yes.
We don't like how people trying to interact with the system are treated.
Yes.
And we want people to have an alternative, not to the medicine, but to the movement behind it.
I think there are two problems that I think that basically this show wants to address. The first is that I think a lot of the time people take the word of like an authority as like absolute, right? And the truth is, I mean, many doctors are fantastic, but some doctors, you know, they got all D's, right? And they're still a doctor, right? What do you call a doctor who got all D's in college? A doctor. So you do need to be educated on your illness. And that doesn't mean necessarily walk in and be like, I know exactly what's wrong with me because I read it on WebMD. Doctors are experts, right? There is, even getting a D, the reason that they're called doctor means that they know, they have approximate knowledge of a lot more things to do with medicine than most people do. But they still make mistakes, right? Even if you get all A's as a doctor, you know, that's 90%. So that means that 10% of the time you were wrong. You know, you could be in that 10%, and you'll never know if you don't take better care of yourself. Maybe a little bit more of a personal anecdote, but one of the antidepressants I took, the top side effect was insomnia. And I was taking it. It was working really well for my depression, but I literally couldn't sleep. And I had never had insomnia like that before in my life. And I kept telling my doctor that that was happening to me, and he never once told me that maybe it has to do with the drug that he had prescribed me. And then I was able to look into all of the things that I was taking. And I was like, well, this drug, the top side effect is insomnia. So that probably is what it is. And yeah, as soon as I took it off, it took a couple weeks to get back to normal. But then I was able to sleep again. The other thing that I want to address, and I will address now, is that I think there's a lot of, the term I'll use is medical gatekeeping, basically. I do think some medical staff often will, I think because they're so overworked and the industry is so difficult, sometimes they're just in a bad mood, frankly. You know, if you're a doctor and you see 8 people who lie to your face, and then you see the 9th person and they tell you the total truth, sometimes you think that 9th person is also lying to you, right? It gives you a bad perception. But I do know, so I had another issue. Back in America, where it was legal, I have consumed, maybe I should use a euphemism, the devil's lettuce. And of course they would always ask me, have you ever consumed the devil's lettuce? And in America, I would say I'm a reasonably heavy user, right? Several times that was used to completely dismiss problems that I had, to the point that they wouldn't even investigate treating it. On that basis on that suggestion. I went off of it completely, and I was still running into those problems. So I knew that they were wrong, basically, at that point. Some of those problems could have been life-threatening. So for them to be dismissed, like, I could have died, basically, because the doctors didn't want to do their job because they were like, you're a druggie, and, this is just because you're a druggie. But now I've been fully clean for over a year, I think, because it is, in fact, illegal in the UK. Taking care of your own health is really important, and you need to advocate for yourself over anything, because the truth is that if I knew now what I knew then, when I went into the hospital that first time and they asked me, are you a heavy user of the devil's lettuce? I would have said no and lied to their face. And I know it's hard, really hard to do, especially to an authority who's there to help you. But sometimes that's a good idea. I'm not going to advocate that you go out there and tell lies, but basically your life is the most important thing to you and the people that love you.
We aren't trying to be that kind of authority, but I think knowing that we have had those experiences and we can empathize with people who are going through those experiences is really important. So.
Well, I don't want to be an authority, basically.
Oh, I know.
I think you're an expert, so you kind of are one by default.
Yeah, but I'm not trying to be the same kind of healthcare authority that's like, oh, this is what's wrong. This is what you need to do, and this is what you don't do. And if you don't follow my instructions, then obviously you're not going to get better. And if you don't do that, then why am I even helping you? Yeah.
Well, what we're trying to do is educate people as a first step to take a look into their own health and to examine a lot of the history of it as well, I think, because partly that's my favorite thing, and partly I think it's important to know that, LSD was used to treat PTSD and then it was fully illegalized, right? All of that I think is important to get a complete picture of what it actually is and what it does.
The thing we're truly trying to fight against is the fight against the system, because it's the system that kind of took this important tool away from people who could have used it.
To change the system. Yeah.
Yes, that's a lot of what we're going to talk about when we talk about history of healthcare, is talking about people who suffered systemic problems and went outside the system or around the system to try and fix them. So to get back to specifically your ketamine experience, I think, so we've talked a lot about what your depression felt like. Do you feel like you've given a pretty good picture about that? Tell us what your depression felt like.
I've been trans my whole life, as long as I can remember. Even as a child, I remember being obsessed with the occasional cartoon where all the characters would change their gender. And, it's for a lot of cis people, I think that's a fun game. What if I was a girl for a day? And I was like, please, 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 please. So I didn't deal with that until I was much older. But that's what I'm talking about. I think that almost hardened me. It hardened my heart. It hardened my mind into a really negative self-perception. I was like, I'm hideous. I'm disgusting. And I remember when I first started to transition, I started working out. And the truth is, I got really buff. And I started to look like a really buff dude. And I felt my soul leave my body, basically. I looked in the mirror and I was like, I am like a buff, manly man. Oh my God. And it destroyed me, in all honesty. I actually immediately stopped dieting, stopped working out, and gained a ton of weight. And the truth is, I do think I needed some of that weight in order to get the body that I wanted to look like. But I definitely didn't need most of it. I think it was just I have to reverse this, so now I'm going to overdo it massively. That was the first part of it, right? And then also, I've experienced abuse from my parents, primarily, and also just a lot of... I had a bit of a tough life, honestly. And pretty much the only way that I made it through all of that was to just constantly distract myself with something. I was always looking at a screen. I was always doing some nonsense just to make sure that I didn't have time to think about how much I wanted to unalive myself. And it was a nightmare. I mean, basically, my philosophical perspective at that point was that life is hell. It's torture. You're going to be tortured your whole life, but there isn't anything else. So I might as well get to the end of it and not ruin anyone else's life any further, even though I thought that everyone else must be living in hell and just dealing with it somehow the same way that I was. And I really thought that was the point. Basically, you go through life, you live in a nightmarish misery, and then eventually you die. I think it's become more normal, unfortunately, but no, that isn't the way that we should live. I think life has so many wonderful things in it, and you really should enjoy it. And if you don't, you need to change. And that's really hard and scary. And when you're treading water and barely alive, it's impossible, honestly. Thank God for me, I had my wife to help me. I don't think I would have been able to do it alone. But that is important too, right? Fall back on the people who love you. And I'm sure there are people who do. Your parents, your siblings, I wouldn't do it with your children unless they're adults. There's a song I really like that's We All Lift Together. And I think that's a really good sentiment, right? The burden of life, when it's shared, is much lighter.
I appreciate that you took a second to talk directly to listeners, because I do think that it's very important anytime we talk about that kind of topic, is to say that I know it's really hard and you might feel like there isn't anyone, but I think everyone has someone. They have a parent or a relative, they have a friend. So I do think that that's something very important to say.
Yeah.
Specifically, so I had looked into ketamine treatment kind of on your behalf.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I think at that point you had tried 3 or 4 different medications.
Yeah.
Which, as anyone who's gone through that process knows, it is a process. You go to the doctor gives you meds, you have to check in every month, and they're like, oh, wait 6 to 8 weeks, see how you feel. It sounds awful, but it is sort of reasonable because these are chemicals working on your brain. But obviously that means that by the time you do 3 or 4 different meds, we're talking about 6 to 8 months down the line, maybe even a year.
And it's so disheartening, because especially when you're that thick in it, to go from like, I don't want to do anything, I don't have the energy to do anything, to then be like, I'm going to try this will cure me, and it does nothing, or it's worse than nothing.
Yeah, and I think it's hard, the amount of work that has to be done just to get to that point. You have to find a doctor, go to the doctor, which can be difficult for a lot of people. You have to keep up with the appointments. You have to keep up with the medication.
I have ADHD, so attending appointments on time regularly is really hard.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us have ADHD, and it is like you're punished almost for having ADHD rather than accommodated. You know, there's so many doctors that I went to where it's like, you miss an appointment, you get a late fee, basically. And then that was it, basically. How are you supposed to be able to treat yourself when you can't get through the hoops you need to jump through in order to do that?
Absolutely.
So, but that is like, lean on people, you know?
Yeah.
That is how I got through it, at least.
Which means that as you know, I saw these medications not working, I was like, okay, what else is there? What else can we look at? You were, because we weren't actually together at the time. They were roommates. We were
true.
Roommates for the first part of it.
Yeah.
And not just roommates, but I would consider us besties.
We were very close friends, yes.
Besties.
Yeah.
But, watching someone go through that, you're like, okay, there's got to be something else. So I did a little bit of research into what was out there. There are more than just psychedelics available as well, if a lot of people are very nervous about that. There's been a lot of success with MRI treatments for treatment-resistant depression. There's been alternative drugs that are not psychedelics. I looked at all the different things, and I saw the ketamine experience, and I felt like it was not just really interesting from a psychiatric perspective, but I think the way that ketamine is supposed to work, that kind of reset it is supposed to give you, and the way that it helps so much with people who also have a background in trauma. It's just, it's one of those things where I saw that like people are not just using it for treatment-resistant depression, but also for dealing with past trauma, and I thought, that kind of fits. So it did take a little while, even because I had originally looked up like a while back, and then you were kind of working through your whole process, getting through your whole thing, and then I was like, okay, this
isn't working.
You're suffering. Like, we have to look into this. So Cheshire was extremely fortunate that we could afford to go into it, which we'll get into in a little bit after we go through the whole actually what it was like getting ketamine.
Yeah.
But we were very fortunate that it was affordable to us. So let's dive into what actually your first ketamine treatment was like.
So I will say, back then I was extremely skeptical of alternative or complementary medicine, right? I was like, if a doctor verified by like 10 peer-reviewed studies doesn't tell you that it works and that you should do it, then don't. Which was a silly perspective to have, I think, because it often, like I said, I was burned multiple times by doctors that were wrong, honestly, or just didn't know, or ignorant, right? So we were fully married at that point, I think, right? When I finally stepped in.
Yes, when you finally
Yes.
went into the therapy. But that's why I'm saying it took a little bit of convincing, because I
Yes.
think you were
I didn't
still
believe
very
it.
skeptical.
I didn't believe it at all. I thought this is nonsense, and it's going to cost me a ton of money for a bunch of nonsense, basically. So yeah, the first time I went in, I was like, is this real medicine? I'm going to this woo-woo place to meet this woo-woo woman, to spend a ton of money to lie in a bed and meditate while I take drugs. Like, surely this is absurd. But that is, so what we did, we went in. We were very fortunate that it was quite close by, actually. And I needed someone to drive me, and Caitlin came with me, partly, I think, because, I was quite anxious, right? It is scary. And we went into this small room that she had, and I lay down on this nice, like, comfortable bed thing. It was nice. The vibes were good. It was clean. And actually, even before the appointment, first we went through an interview process. And I think that eased my fears a lot. Actually speaking to her and realizing, like, no, this is a real person. She knows what she's doing. She's an expert. She's done this many times before. It's helped people. Did ease my concerns a little bit. But then when I did finally go in, I was nervous. And I was like, Caitlin had offered, but can my wife stay here with me while I go through this, basically? She was like, yeah, sure. And then I also discussed that painkillers don't really work very well on me at all, in all honesty. They never have my whole life. I remember I underwent surgery on my big toe on my right foot, and basically without painkillers because of...
You have anesthetic resistance.
Yes.
So
that was horrible.
Something that a lot of people suffer from.
Yeah.
Fun fact, if you're a natural redhead, you are more likely to have anesthetic resistance. But I do think that in our kind of anti-painkiller culture, a lot of people don't believe you.
Probably 90% of the time I go to a traditional doctor and I say anything like that, they narrow their eyes and like they'll say, well, we'll give you a standard dose or whatever, right? Which usually isn't enough. And then, I can tell that they leave and they're like, we got a druggie in Bay 3 that wants, extra drugs or whatever, right? But no, I told Robin that, and she was like, okay, then I'll give you a little extra. And she gave me a dose, and then she came back to give me more, basically. But I had to raise my hand and be like, I need more, or I'd like more, really. And I think the goal was basically to K-hole, right, is the term, which is you, like, what is the actual scientific term for a K-hole?
I would say it's a disassociation. It's
Sure.
a state of disassociation where you're in the place where you are.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think disassociation is the best word for it.
I think basically, I ceased to be myself for like a minute, right? And it was almost like a really crazy...
I think it was longer than a minute. It felt like a minute, maybe.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. It was like an hour or so. But so basically, my wife, my beautiful wife, Caitlin, was there. She held my hand often. I'd ask her for various things while I was under. I wasn't like totally incoherent, right? And I saw this like crazy dream vision, almost sort of a thing. I do think I had a headset on that was playing meditation music, and that was really good.
And an eye mask.
An eye mask, yeah. So it was all to kind of like let me travel inward to some extent. And I think that the things that I saw and felt really like gave me a chance to change. It lets you get outside of yourself to some extent, I think. And when I was under ketamine, I felt like my breath was like easier to take. I could take deep breaths and it felt like fresh air, like filling my body instead of like me sitting there and just trying to survive. Mm-hmm. So I will say, I had, this was non-traditional, right? This is not, the way that Robin normally did it was that she would leave the room and people would go through their own journey. My wife was there the whole time. I think that actually helped a lot. So again, advocate for yourself, right? If whoever brought you to the clinic, hopefully someone did, because you need someone to drive you home, basically. At least in America. Here, there's more public transport options.
I still wouldn't want to walk.
That's true, and you should probably be with someone, because you're a little bit not all there, right, immediately after. But yeah, Caitlin was there the whole time, and I rambled. You might notice I am a chatterbox. I did sure ramble. So she wrote down some of the things that I was saying.
Here's a good one. What is the point of this little creature called me? Which is adorable. Life is just a series of experiences. But they should be good experiences. Why are there bad experiences?
I think I have an answer to that now, but I guess at the time I was still working through it.
There's a part where you say, she's holding her hand and I can rub her hand and it's beautiful. That's the outside force. The outside force is good. Sometimes the outside force is bad. The inside force is me. So that's good.
I did feel, so as part of my vision almost, I had like this idea that we were all like, almost like atoms, right? People are going to accuse me of being pseudoscientific here, but listen, it was a ketamine vision quest, so cut me a little bit of slack.
It's all subjective.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to be different, and yeah.
Well, oh yes. So I thought of us as like atoms. So it was almost like we were all, because atoms don't really touch. They just sort of like influence each other and bounce off of each other, like magnets almost. Actually, I think that is how magnetism works to some extent. This is all much more complicated than I actually know. I'm not a scientist. So, like, that's how we influence each other. And your internal mind, your body, all of that, there's no way to really truly share that. That is you. That's yours. It's only for you. And you are, unfortunately, alone in that, right? Only you know exactly what you're thinking and feeling. A lot of what made me hopefully a better person is that my wife really helped me communicate better. And that's important.
So do you think that ketamine helped you to admit that you were wrong about
yes.
things?
Oh, I was wrong about so many things. Absolutely. Like I said, my whole perception of the world was totally wrong. Most of the time you don't think to yourself, I think I'll change my whole perception of the world today, right? So that's where ketamine helped, basically. Ketamine gave me a chance to introspect and look at myself and be like, what is my perception of the world? That was some of the things that you were reading, basically. That was me questioning, what do I believe, actually? And then being able to come up with my own answers. So after every session, we would cover, basically, what I saw, how I felt about it, what my goals were. I remember one of my sessions maybe went more poorly than it could have. And I think your headspace before you go under ketamine is important.
The day of ketamine should be a day where you don't do anything too intense.
Yeah.
You treat yourself good. Don't eat before, but have a nice meal after. Be kind to yourself that day.
Over the next month or so, after I did all my sessions and had like a little bit to incorporate it, I was able to change basically my whole perspective of the world into a much more positive one that I actually enjoy living in. It is really nice. Unfortunately, I do have to re-up it. I think at the time I thought this will last forever and I don't have to ever do it again. Realistically, I think it lasts like 3 to 6 months for me, basically.
So I think that's an important thing to ask is the ongoing process of ketamine treatment.
Yes.
Can sometimes be really long term. A lot of people can go through ketamine treatment and never need it again or never want it again. But I think based on what Robin said and based on your experience, a lot of people kind of can get back to
negative habits.
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect, right? So all it takes is doing one bad thing, and then you do the same bad thing the next day.
Yeah.
And then you do the same bad thing for 2 weeks.
Especially in older people, because you're in your 30s. Neuroplasticity isn't as powerful as you get older. So if your brain is physically struggling to make those new connections, that's what the ketamine is for. We're going to gently touch on the financial reality of ketamine and other psychedelic treatments.
Yes.
It is, unfortunately, it's not an accepted treatment on the NHS. And it's not covered by 99% of insurances, I would assume. So this is something that you had to pay completely out of pocket for, which is a huge, in my opinion, burden.
Our plan is to go to Portugal, where it's 200 euros per session.
It's going to depend on where you are in the U.S. It's going to depend on what country you're in. It's going to depend on whether or not it's actually legal in that country, because it is very gray area legal.
But the environment, I will also say, is very important. I think being in the lovely room that Robin made for us was critically important to having a good journey.
Like, I wish that this could be made available to everyone who suffers from any level of depression. What do you think, from your perspective? What's your biggest hope for the future of psychedelics in this treatment?
I mean, I hope it becomes fully legal, frankly. It used to be, and the world didn't end. I think it should be, frankly. I think it's absurd that it isn't. The actual drug ketamine costs probably pennies to manufacture, and yet we had to pay, hundreds, thousands to access it. And I guess, so yeah, my fantasy, maybe, is that it becomes fully legal, that people are able to use it in a way that that you can regularly introspect. If you know someone in your life that is really struggling, I know it's hard just to keep your head above water sometimes, but yeah. As you give, as you radiate light and love out into the world, they light up, and they will radiate that light and love back to you and everyone around them. Rely on other people and be someone other people can rely on if you can. But don't beat yourself up either, right? It's important, like, if you're really struggling and you can't be there for everyone, that's okay. The analogy I always use, my wife and I both use, is that you need to, on an airplane when it's crashing, right? They tell you to put the mask on your own face first. And obviously that's critical. If you're dying and you're trying to take care of other people, like...
Yeah, I would never have been able to do everything that I did for you if I hadn't been working on myself so much before that. I think it would be interesting to kind of get your view, and I'll share a little bit about how I feel about what the best way to help the people of the UK see that this is a good thing, and then they can help change that system.
In the same way that, like, a lot of times we'll look at a plant and say that's a plant and that's a weed. They're both plants.
I think I jokingly said yesterday, a weed is just a social construct.
But it is.
It is.
It literally is.
Yeah.
Right? Many of the plants that we use in our herbalism are weeds, considered weeds. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, you can call it that. But what a negative connotation for a plant that's going to help someone. We all do drugs, truthfully, right? You have coffee in the morning, that's caffeine. You're doing a drug. I think to be completely, like, even lidocaine, you take icy hot, right? Because you have a sore spot. That's lidocaine. That's a drug. There is no way to be truly drug-free. Don't take anyone's opinion as fact.
I would say probably the most important message that I would share is, if you're afraid of something, who told you to be afraid of it, and why would they want you to be afraid of it? All right. I think that's a fantastic point to end it on.
Yeah.
Just want to thank everybody for listening to the first episode.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hit the little heart. This is our first episode, and I have no experience, so we're going to figure it out.
Yeah. However you found us, thank you so much for joining us. Again, I am Caitlin.
And I'm Cheshire. Common Roots.
Roots.
Yes. Perfect. Let's go.